Let's talk to Simon Marks. He is LBC's Washington correspondent, joins us on the line now. Hello, Simon.
Evening, Nick.
What developments today?
Well, Donald Trump took to his favourite television programme at breakfast time, Fox and Friends, and basically used an extensive interview with that broadcast, I think, to send a message to European leaders. And the message is that if they had departed Washington, D.C. after that day-long summit at the White House with President Zelensky, thinking that they had succeeded in peeling Donald Trump away from Vladimir Putin, in dragging him out of Vladimir Putin's orbit, they needed to think again. I mean, it was an extraordinary display of the extent to which the Russian president absolutely has captured Donald Trump's viewpoint on Ukraine. And there were points during this interview in which he was literally making the history of the region up out of whole cloth. I mean, the interview is being best noted for the fact that he said there would be no American troops that will be putting their feet on Ukrainian soil as part of any security guarantees. I mean, more broadly on the issue of security guarantees, he spoke in such generic terms that I think it'd be completely impossible for any European leader to understand with any specificity what he's even thinking of committing. Take a listen to this.
There'll be some form of security. It can't be NATO because that's just not something that would ever happen. They couldn't do that. So who would want that? I mean, if you were Russia, who would want to have your enemy, your opponent, sitting on your line? You don't do that.
He actually slips in that answer. The first time he says it can't be NATO because he couldn't, and then he goes, they couldn't. And he was clearly thinking about what Vladimir Putin had told him. I mean, the plan has not been for NATO alone to provide those security guarantees, but for European countries, including the UK and other NATO members, to be working with non-NATO members in providing security guarantees. But what kind of backstop he is willing to offer to meet, for example, the Prime Minister's demand that if UK troops are going to put their lives on the line, whether it's on the ground, at sea or in the air, he wants to know that there's an American military backstop protecting them. All we got from him today was that there will be some kind of security. But more broadly, this was a president of the United States who was completely reflecting Vladimir Putin's talking points about the future of Ukraine, and actually even accused European leaders, including our own Prime Minister, of yesterday putting on a bit of a show at the White House.
Everybody can play cute and this and that, but, you know, Ukraine's going to get their life back. They're going to stop having people killed all over the place, and they're going to get a lot of land. But this was a war, and Russia is a powerful military nation, you know, whether people like it or not. It's a powerful nation. It's a much bigger nation. It's not a war that should have been started. You don't do that. You don't take on a nation that's 10 times your size. And now they're talking about Donbass, but Donbass right now, as you know, is 79% owned and controlled by Russia. So they understand what that means.
So he spoke in that interview, once again, by the way, implying that Ukraine had started the war. We're back to that falsehood. And for the first time, publicly appeared to endorse Vladimir Putin's key demand at the moment, which is that Russia needs to surrender the whole of Donbass. Ukraine needs to surrender the whole of Donbass to Russia as part of any peace process. A situation that, as Volodymyr Zelensky and the Europeans tried to point out yesterday, would leave Russian forces immediately able to leapfrog the Ukrainian defensive line that is holding them off from capturing parts of Donbass. So it'd be a huge military advantage to the Russians were Zelensky even to entertain the idea of giving Donbass away, which he clearly is not willing to do. It's also important to underscore, I mean, he made stuff up in this interview. He talked about Barack Obama having given away the Crimea to Vladimir Putin in 2014, to the point where Donald Trump described it as the worst real estate deal in history. He seems to think that there was some negotiation in 2014 whereby Obama gave Vladimir Putin the thumbs up and afforded him full control and basically sovereignty over Crimea. He doesn't even understand that his own government currently does not recognize Crimea as being Russian sovereign territory. The United States continues to recognize it as being Ukrainian sovereign territory that was illegally annexed by Vladimir Putin without, it has to be said, any particularly strong consequences from Barack Obama. But certainly Barack Obama never engaged in any kind of agreement to give it to him. It wasn't in Barack Obama's gift to give. And there were other areas of the interview where he invented history out of whole cloth, saying that, any notion of Ukrainian membership of NATO had been a no-no for Russia long before Putin. Well, it wasn't a no-no for Russia. I mean, Boris Yeltsin, even in 1991, flirted with the idea of Russia joining NATO. Vladimir Putin had a conversation with Bill Clinton about joining NATO in 2017. So the point I'm making here is, what he's doing, as we've seen in so many other areas, is he's making policy based on a completely false understanding or interpretation or narrative of the facts. And for Keir Starmer and his colleagues, that's going to be monumentally complicated in the months and years ahead.
Well, there's an enormous amount to talk about from what you just said. First of which is that he said this on Fox, which is a TV station that he's suing for $1 billion, and they're still having him on.
Yes, of course. Well, I mean, his great box office. He not only was on, but he was enthusiastically advertising his appearance on Fox this morning, because I think overnight, having seen some of the commentary and having listened to what European leaders said to him yesterday, including the challenges that he received on camera from Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, and French President Emmanuel Macron, I think he really wanted to push back at any notion that they had succeeded in bringing him back from the dark side. This was also an interview that I think was designed to make it clear to his base that he has no intention of getting militarily embroiled in Ukraine, and he had a reason for doing that. There's a right-leaning newspaper here, very sympathetic to Trump, popular with his MAGA faithful, called The Washington Examiner. And it got terribly excited yesterday because it read into something that Trump had said during the course of his meetings at the White House, the possibility that Trump was about to announce American military involvement in providing security guarantees, which would, of course, be anathema to many of his core supporters. And I think he was determined to get on television this morning and make it absolutely clear that that is not going to happen and is not part of his thinking. But what his thinking might be on security guarantees, we have absolutely no idea, and the Europeans can't have any idea.
Yeah, to be fair to Trump, it was part of his manifesto. He promised the American people that he was going to bring the troops home from wherever they may be. So that shouldn't come as a surprise. But he has talked in the past of some sort of security that the US might provide. And one of the things that he said, I mean, it's very difficult to know that, to actually refer back more than about 5 minutes, because you know that he would have changed his mind about 10 times in the intervening period. But he was saying a while ago that the very presence of American businesses in Ukraine would prevent Vladimir Putin's expansionist tendencies.
Yes, particularly geologists who are going to be digging up all of Ukraine's rare earths and making off with them as part of the deal that he was proposing at the time, the first deal on rare earths that was going to lead absolutely to Ukraine's extortion. Of course, the deal that was signed was considerably watered down and less pernicious than that. But he appeared to suggest at that time that the mere presence of American citizens, engaged in construction or literally digging up rare earths, whatever it's going to be, Vladimir Putin would understand that there was a risk that if he went after the peacekeepers, he might, by some mistake, kill an American who was there doing business, and that would be catastrophic for Putin. I don't know why Putin would think it would be catastrophic for Putin, given that Donald Trump continues to make threats to invoke sanctions against Russia and never, ever follows through on them. He's not laid a glove on Vladimir Putin since he came into office, and is clearly still completely beguiled by them. So that was one argument that he was advancing. As to what his answer is to that European demand for a backstop, I mean, the detail of this matters. I don't think European governments were imagining that American boots were going to be on the ground in Ukraine. That's never been the ask. But they do want to know that if they do come under attack, then either by the use of drones or through intelligence that is shared with them or through some kind of muscular response from the White House, Donald Trump is going to have their back. And as you and I talked about a couple of nights ago, at the heart of this is really the question of whether the Europeans and Zelensky can trust Trump. And today was yet another day when I think he demonstrated to them that they really can't, because he continues to be absolutely drawn to Vladimir Putin's approach towards Ukraine like a magnet. It's as though there's a magnetic force pulling him into the Kremlin's orbit, and he simply won't break with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that he's talking about, NATO this and NATO that, and that's not what Putin would like. And yet, Steve Witkoff, the billionaire donor, this inept envoy that Trump has appointed because of his largesse, he said that the US would provide some sort of NATO Article 5-like security. What on earth did he mean by that?
Well, we still have no idea. I mean, as we said the other night, that phrase was gobbledygook, and the word like contained in it. Article 5-like commitments. No European leader emerged yesterday with any clear understanding of what that means, because Article 5, of course, is the Mutual Defence Pact that lies at the heart of the NATO covenant. An attack on one is an attack on all and will lead to a potential response from NATO collectively. But what does that mean in the context of a security guarantee operation that is being mounted by European and non-European governments without any direct American involvement? And in what way was securing that commitment from Putin any kind of a breakthrough when, even while European leaders were meeting Donald Trump at the White House yesterday, the Russians were putting out a statement saying, no, we didn't agree to anything like that. Absolutely not. I think they actually accused Keir Starmer of feeding that line to Donald Trump, as though the British government in some way was responsible for the words that came out of Witkoff's mouth on CNN on Sunday. I meant to mention this the other day, by the way, and forgot. Steve Witkoff, who, as you know, is this real estate magnate and golfing buddy of Donald Trump, he agrees he's got no foreign policy experience as he flies around the world meeting with Putin and Netanyahu and all of these kind of people. But he has disclosed that one of the ways that he has boned up on foreign policy is by watching a whole raft of Netflix documentaries about history. So that's good.
You mentioned that
I know what I'm going to do tonight.
Yeah. You mentioned that he said that Ukraine... No, you didn't mention it. He said it on the clip that you played. Ukraine is going to get a lot of land. Does that mean...
Yes.
What does that mean? That they're going to keep some land or get some extra land?
Absolutely no idea. He keeps talking about land swaps. Well, I can understand what he wants Ukraine to give up: the Crimea, the entire region of Donbass, who knows, maybe even more. But he keeps saying that Ukraine's going to get a lot of land. I actually think what he meant by that today was that at the end of the day, Ukraine's still going to have loads of land. I don't think he was suggesting in that particular interview, as he has suggested in other appearances, that Russia in some way is going to give up land. I mean, what land would Russia give up to Ukraine as part of this? There's absolutely no indication that that's taking place. There was another brief clip from the interview that's worth a listen, where, again, he kind of makes the history of Ukraine up to fit his own narrative. Take a listen to this.
Ukraine was sort of a buffer between Russia and the rest of Europe. And it was a big, wide buffer. Everything worked out well until Biden got involved.
It was a big wide buffer until Biden got involved. I mean, what does that mean?
Do you think that he actually believes the things that come out of his mouth, but that by simply saying them, they become true? Is he a person that has never been corrected, and that is increasingly true, and so it's just in a sort of a fantasy that he creates for himself?
Well, he definitely didn't like it when he was corrected yesterday by Friedrich Merz. There's no question that the German Chancellor got under his skin yesterday in the conversation about ceasefires, because the German Chancellor says there's got to be a ceasefire before you can have full peace negotiations, and Donald Trump waves that away and says it's not necessary, as though it's a minor issue, which it clearly is not. I think on a whole raft of policies now, this is not just about Ukraine. This is about his governing principle. Whether he at first believes the stuff he's saying, I don't know. But eventually he comes to believe it all. I think he genuinely now believes that there is a crime wave in Washington, D.C. that has turned this city into bedlam, that it's not safe for any of us to go out. And now, a week after he ordered the National Guard completely unnecessarily to take up positions in this city, he is claiming that friends of his are calling him up. He said this yesterday. He'd had two friends of his that had called him up and said, I've just gone out to a restaurant in Washington for the first time in 4 years. Thank you so much for making it safe for me and my family to go out.
Yeah.
We've had Kristi Noem, the head of the Homeland Security Department today, saying residents of Washington are finally able to go to the grocery store again. I mean, it's absolute fiction. I can also tell you from another piece of my life, one of the outfits that I report from here is in South Africa. And if you look at what he's done to the US bilateral relationship with South Africa, based on an entirely false narrative, he claims completely falsely that the South African government is expropriating land from Afrikaner farmers, actively doing it. This is something that has never happened. There is a new law in place that theoretically one day might perhaps allow the government to do it, but they've never done it. He's convinced himself that it's actively happening, and as a result of that, he has thrown the nation's doors open to white Afrikaners who want to claim refugee status in the United States. He's closed the country's doors to everybody else but white Afrikaner farmers who can take advantage of the complete misinformation that he is spreading about what is taking place in South Africa, can appeal to be granted refugee status and are being welcomed to the United States as refugees. So in all of these different pockets, it's policy being completely based on misinformation. The South African government cannot get him back on the straight and narrow. And I think with regard to Ukraine, European governments are going to struggle to do that as well.
You know, you talked about his governing principle. I think that was summed up perfectly in the photograph of the of the leaders exiting through the gift shop of the White House while Trump showed off his Trump 2028 merchandise.
So this is a new thing. This is a new thing. He started doing it. It started with the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan last week when they were here to sign a peace agreement at the White House, and credit to him for making that happen. You know, it's one of the most intractable conflicts in the world, and if he's able to deliver some measure of peace to it, then that's an achievement. They were escorted to the gift shop by the president with members of their delegation, and he shows them the Trump 2028 hat. And he, very generously says to everybody there, help yourself, take whatever you want, take it, take it all. Yesterday, he took Zelensky, I think, I can't remember who else was in there. Was it Merz or Stubb, I think, from Finland, and maybe one other. They got taken into the White House gift shop. And when he had the European leaders in the Oval Office, if you look at the picture of them sitting there all looking somewhat devastated by the day that they've gone through with him as he holds court in the Oval Office on the Resolute desk, you can see that he's got these gold keys to the White House that he gives everybody when they come visiting in wooden boxes. And you sit there and you think, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Giorgia Meloni, who always looks like she just can't wait to get out of his orbit, even though he seems to like to flirt with her and thinks that, you know, she's on his side.
Yeah.
They're all just sitting there thinking, I just want to go home, and now we've got to go, and now he's going to give me the golden key. I mean, it's extraordinary.
What give is would be a surprise. If they paid for it, I wouldn't be remotely surprised. No refunds, no exchanges. Simon,
Yeah,
always a
exactly.
pleasure. Thanks for that. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent.